Hi, welcome to the Divine Insight Show. Thank you so much for joining me wherever and whenever you're doing so. There's no accident that you're here. I'm grateful for your time, honored for your audience, wherever, whether you're looking on YouTube or on the podcast or on my show website, divineinsight.com. Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to have Mina Samuels on with me today, who wrote this incredible book, Run Like a Girl, 365 Days a Year. Mina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Travis.
You're welcome. And, you know, we were speaking before the show a bit as a fellow, attorney. It's so funny that so many of us end up in the wellness industry now. Isn't that great?
Well, perhaps it's because, well, I can't speak for you, but I could say that for myself, the practice of law was not the right path for me. And the very stark realization of that is what made me very conscious of trying to be on the right path. It's like you need the wrong path to really show you where the right one might be.
It's fascinating because I see this a lot in the spiritual work that I do with clients. We're all seemingly still at this level of contrast, which is we learn what we want because we see what we don't want. Rather than sitting within, we can actually create by solely what we want, but we're still at this level of kind of stubbornness, I'd say, where we really do kind of bounce off the side of the doors before realizing there's a handle. But this is fantastic. I'm so excited to talk to you about this. And as the title says, it's a practical, personal, inspirational guide for women athletes. How did this come about?
The book itself, or so the book came about.
Let's start with how you started to work on your own as an athlete, and then maybe how the book came out itself. Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the story about how the sort of athletic moment in my life that opened this path that I've been on since then, which has taken a lot of curlicues, but definitely started in that moment. I moved to New York 26 years ago, and I was doing my Master's of Law at Columbia, and I started running a little bit while I was in the city. I was definitely not an athlete. I was an outdoor girl. I'd gone to summer camp. I liked summer camp. I always needed to move, but I certainly didn't understand how to be an athlete, and like that discipline, and I didn't understand how to commit to myself to get better. So I was talking to the law librarian, who was a very serious runner, and I was telling her that I had started running, and I had just moved from Canada to New York. And she said, "Oh, well, how much do you run?" And I said, "Oh, I run 10, like 3 to 4 times a week." And which was a teeny bit of an exaggeration. I ran like 3 times a week. I would run like 10 kilometers. I came from Canada, so I was thinking in kilometers. And she was super impressed by what I said. And I thought, I don't know why. I know that I'm not running that much, that she, a marathon runner, would be impressed. So I left. And after I left, I thought, oh, I'm in the United States. And in the United States, 10 means miles. It doesn't mean
right.
And I had never run 10 miles in my life. And if you'd asked me that morning when I woke up, I would have said, I could never run 10 miles. That is just way too far for me. But because I'm a bit stubborn, because I'm a Taurus, and because I don't want to feel like I misrepresented myself to someone, I went home, life of a student. I had complete flexibility. I didn't have a class. I put on my running gear, and I went out and I ran 2 loops of Central Park, which is 12 miles.
Oh my gosh.
And somewhere in that second loop, it was like the top of my head just kind of opened in that sort of Monty Python way, and flowers grew out of it. And I just felt but I really did. I mean, I know part of that is runner's high, but part of it was just this, we're not afforded very often in our lives, like a moment where we see how we thought of ourselves that morning is not how we need to be. Like that we can actually be different, that different things are possible. And for me, that was a moment like that. And I feel like it sounds a little silly, but you know, oh, I went out for a longer run and bam, I changed my life. But I kind of did, because I was so taken aback by this capacity that it created an energy for me that enabled me to move in a new direction and see more options. And ultimately that was part of the direction that I moved, was away from law, but back toward things I had loved as a kid and as a teen. I had loved writing. I had loved the theater. The theater took me a lot longer to get back to, but those things became possible that day because I started to, it was like I could use the athletics that I started doing, which was primarily running at first, and then triathlons and then other things. It was like this little microcosm which I could test out, like, okay, how are you in a situation of adversity? And, you know, how are you at setting a whole bunch of day-to-day challenges and living up to them? And it also completed me in a way, because I'd always been good at school. And so I thought of myself as a smart person. But I definitely doubted my physical presence in the world. And now I know that how I am inside my body is incredibly important for any kind of work that I'm doing. It's important for me when I'm writing. It's important for me if I'm performing. It's important, you know, in setting myself up for a conversation with you, for example. So that's how I kind of got on. It's how I got on the athletic path. But it's also why at a certain point in my writing, I was brainstorming with a friend, and I was saying I'd been writing fiction, which is very hard to get published. And and there was also this piece of myself. The reason I went into law was because I wanted to change the world.
Yeah.
And
me too.
right. And then it didn't quite work out the way I wanted. Like, it wasn't the avenue that was going to be my avenue for changing the world. So, but I'm glad I studied it. I don't know about you, but I feel like it created kind of structure in my thinking and a confidence in my intellect. But I was brainstorming with this friend about, you know, what do you want to write about that's nonfiction? What are you passionate about? And I realized that what I was passionate about was how sports at any level can impact a woman's life and transform her vision of herself. Because I knew it wasn't just me that had this experience. I had enough running partners and women friends who I encountered who really talked about the sports they did as the key that kind of unlocked their power in other parts of their lives. So I wrote a first book about it. And then the second one, the first book was very much individual, like, how does it transform an individual woman's life? And I realized that I had not gone far enough, because what really interested me, you know, it's like a study comes out and it says, oh, you exercise, your brain gets bigger. But why? I mean, what for? What are you using it for? How are you using whatever this extra energy source is to plug yourself into the rest of the world, into everybody else? And I really wanted to explore that. So that's how this book came about. And that was a really long answer.
Well, it's so interesting. And thank you for that. And I actually really do. I loved law. I loved learning the law. It was never one to want to practice through various ways that we kind of talk about. You know, as stubborn people, sometimes we learn, you know, experientially from the things that we don't want. As we had already mentioned, I learned what area I wanted to be a part of through a series of eliminations. You know, criminal defense, family laws, tax law, no way. You know, just certain things. But I love the interaction and the feeling aspect of HR and employment law. And I'm fascinated with trying to interrupt oppression in the world and what that looks like. So, and it's fascinating because I don't know, I didn't mention this before. I was a cross country runner in junior high and high school, and actually in college. And so there is something, I didn't have what I would say that you experienced with this running, of the more existential level of awareness. I just was sort of thinking like, I'm going to feel so much better when I'm done.
Yes.
You know, because it's difficult for a lot of people to want to run. I mean, it can be very jarring to the physical body, and it does require a level of fitness. And, you know, if you're not particularly aligned in your body, you can get aches in new places, and I'm sure, and it can be quite intimidating, frankly,
Yeah.
To even start. But what I love about this is, you know, I love that it's a bit of a play on run like a girl. You know, women, you know, this is the time. I actually remember a conversation I had with an astrologer on the show last year, a famous astrologer, that talked about, because I asked him, what's in store for the US in the next year, in 2019, 2020? Just tell me what's up astrologically. And it was interesting what he said. He said, it's all about gender. Women coming into power from the oppression, and everything that we know about every study that's been done about what happens in an organization when women are empowered.
Right.
You know, it becomes more profitable.
Right. Yes.
You know, and it's just and to interrupt the misogynistic nature in which many organizations are still in. It's why I always love to have incredible women like yourself on the show. So this is 365 days, every day. So can you talk a bit about how readers will utilize this book?
So obviously readers can do whatever they want with the book. I think of it as it's like a snack, a daily snack. But I don't intend for people to read it, you know, starting on January 1 of a year and then only read one day a year. You read as much as you're moved to read. If you read it out of order, it's fine. I think the book works better if you start at the beginning of the year and experience the cycle of the year as I wrote it. Mm-hmm. I did spend a fair amount of time trying to craft the reason I wanted to write a book of days was because it allowed me to be cyclical with themes, as opposed to having one chapter that's about friendship and another chapter that's about daily challenges. It could cycle through the themes and come back to them with fresh knowledge and new perspectives, because we looked at other themes, and we can take account for the seasons. And also the fact that our energy and emotions shift throughout the year, sometimes throughout a day. And I wanted to kind of play with that a little in the flow of the book. So for readers, I'd say read it in sequence, but you don't need to feel precious about that. And just read as much as, or as little as kind of captures you that day. I have talked to a fair number of people who feel like they just open it at random and see what the day says to them. And they've found that very effective.
So it's kind of like, well, what we would do even in like tarot card readings, not to get too woo-woo-y, it's like, let the divine within you find the moment, and there'll be no accident that I'm going to turn now to June 7th, you know, and talk about the hare and the frogs. But it's great to know that it's not going to be, hey, everybody go buy this book and wait till January 1st.
Oh, no.
It's like you can start wherever you're at, and you said sequentially. Did you also in mind with this, with not just like the calendar year, but the seasons as well?
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
amazing.
Because the seasons affect us. I mean, at the most basic level, because I'm talking about our engagement with sports, and because for me, the majority of what I do athletically is outside. the seasons are a huge part of where I am in the world and how I'm feeling. And I love
New York.
Yeah, well, I am in New York, but we also spend 6 weeks in the winter and 6 weeks in the summer in the Sierra Mountains in Truckee, California. Wonderful. So I do a lot of cross-country skiing, and then in the summer I do a lot of mountain running and mountain biking. And because I need that kind of outdoor refresher and solitude time, for some solitary time.
Have you done any climbing? I'm just curious.
So, I used to, I did some climbing. My partner doesn't like it, so I didn't have a climbing partner.
Right.
And I didn't get far enough to to find someone. And it was also one of those things where I thought, okay, if I really commit to climbing, I'm going to be gone so many weekends because I want to be going climbing. And it didn't, in the balance, it didn't feel like what I wanted to do to my relationship, but climbing was great. I mean, do you climb?
Yeah, I'm a climber. I bouldered for many years, and then I do mostly sport climbing now. But I'm just curious because you have a similar energy about you that I can tell, kind of a kindred spirit, which is a little bit of the, I won't say adrenaline junkie in the sense of the negativity, but there is this sort of aspect of like the desire for the freedom and the movement and the active work of the body that is so fascinating. And in particular, with running, it's just.
Yes, I loved climbing. I mean, climbing was, there was something that was very exciting about it. Although I would say that I've retrieved some of that with mountain biking, because trail running is engaging, of course, because you need to see where your feet are going. But mountain biking is even, it's just because it's a little bit more dangerous. And, that thrill of making it through an obstacle on your bike and feeling the oneness with your bike, the way you feel the oneness with the rock and the rope and when you're climbing, is so fantastic. I mean, you just feel like you're with the universe.
Yeah, in the flow, and that's so wonderful. And speaking of like being in the flow, the work that you do, particularly in focusing on women athletes, I'm really interested in learning more about sort of anything that was sort of a unanticipated for you as you thought about it, as you started working with women, talking to women. Was there anything that you found like incredibly profound about the experience of women in athletics that you'd like to share?
I think what it is with women is that we are simultaneously we can be simultaneously very acquainted with our bodies, because there's a lot going on in our bodies. So, we have to be aware of that. It's like, oh, I'm having my period, or, oh, I'm pregnant, or whatever the thing is that's happening with or I'm aging. But we're not necessarily listening to them all the time. Like, we wait for them to give us very big signs, as opposed to, and although we're simultaneously in touch with our bodies, we allow the world to objectify them, as opposed to using them for our own purposes. And what I find about sports is that as women start to get a little more serious about, there's a shift when you stop doing the sport because of how you want to look, and you start doing it because of how you feel inside your body. And I think that women who make that shift, there's a freedom in their life that comes with that is very empowering, because you just feel good. You feel like, I belong here. I'm good enough the way I am. In fact, maybe I'm great the way I am. And I'm strong. So
yeah, I see that. I'm thinking, it makes me think about the criticisms that women get that are all, misogyny based, around women who are powerful, women who are strong. And, you know, as we know about understand exercise science, you know, exercising a certain way does boost testosterone in our systems. And, you know, that sort of, I guess I'll say it, the more classically stereotypical women traits, you know, emotional, soft, these are all steeped in hypermasculinity. I'm not saying they're not, but that, so as an athlete, you know, I'm just curious around that dynamic in particular. Any insights that you gained around women who might tend to sort of even over emasculate, you become like losing touch with their femininity, if in that even is that does that make sense?
I know what you're saying, but I actually don't feel like that happens in sports. I feel like that happens when women you know, step into positions of power. Say they become CEO of a giant Fortune 500 corporation, and they feel like they need to behave in the way that society has dictated that a CEO is supposed to behave. But I feel like with sports, you get more centered in your body. And so you feel more comfortable in whatever you're wearing, which feels, and whatever you're doing and how you're kind of manifesting physically in the world, which to me feels more powerfully feminine.
It's like the masks fall away.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
And sports are very emotional. I mean, they're very emotional. I don't know how you felt when you were cross country running, but you know,
like I was dying a little.
But I'm just thinking, I mean, I can't, there have been so many times I've been running with girlfriends and the two of us are like, you know, sobbing and running at the same time because we're sharing some emotional story. Or I feel sometimes particularly if I'm running alone and I'm doing a long, you know, kind of run in the mountains, I'll just be running through nature and all of a sudden be overwhelmed by how beautiful it is and how lucky I am that I can, you know, have that feeling and have that, that I've been afforded that day's connection to the earth. So I don't think sports diminish those aspects that we think of as classically feminine. I think they can, in fact, enhance them.
Yeah, I really appreciate that insight. You know, as you were describing the experience of running, it reminds me, I think it's not a coincidence that I'm talking about climbing, because there are certain things that we do with our physical bodies that bring us to that state of awareness, that present moment awareness, that is all that exists. But we tend to spend a lot of time worrying about the future or fearing the future, worrying about the past and stuff. So, but what I've experienced with running is, I mean, even one time, as you were talking, you reminded me of a time when I started running and I had this awareness that something felt off, something felt wrong, and I wasn't sure what it was. And I was like, what is up? What's going on? And all of a sudden, I felt like I needed to forgive myself. And I wasn't sure what for. But I said, I forgive myself. And then I said, for what? And then it was like, for everything. And then I just, like you were talking about, it's like waterworks. I buckled over. I had to stop running. And I was like having a moment, you know, in this beautiful canal in the Fremont area of Seattle, running along it. And I'm like, I'm a hot mess. But what I realized is that I had this self-judgment about everything I thought I had done to myself that was negative, my patterns of addiction, my relationship attraction, which wasn't working for me. And what I love about how you've put this incredible daily, you know, insight together is that it brings that out, I think, very, very beautifully.
Thank you.
And I'm curious, how did you come up with these daily practices?
Well, this book took many forms before it ended up in this form. And So I wrote it. I started the book actually on a vision quest I did in New Mexico, and
Ooh, that's exciting.
yes. I mean, I have my notebook. There wasn't anything else I could do. I was, 4 days of the vision quest were in the desert fasting, so by yourself. So there wasn't, you couldn't bring books or there was no elaborate meals to make. There was nothing really to do except contemplate the world and write. So I started it there, just kind of generating material. And then I started to think, well, maybe this could be a book of some kind, and I'm not quite sure what. But what I loved about it was it satisfied my kind of magpie curiosity about the world. And this, so I don't know, for 3 or 4 years, I was constantly, because I don't know why, but well, I do know why, because it's a pain to carry around. I don't carry a journal with me. So I spend a lot of time emailing myself notes that I want to remember, that I want to think about writing. So I would literally be in the middle of a conversation with someone and they would say something that sparked an idea, and I would email myself, okay, this is a possible day. This is a thing that I could.
Oh, fascinating.
Or anything I was reading. And where you get to that point where everything new that you learn is relevant to what you're thinking about, like you did it that way. So that's how it sort of came to be, was just opening up my curiosity to everything that was going on and trying to see, okay, how's that connected to this, and what little piece of wisdom comes from my observation of that interaction in the coffee shop, and what little piece of wisdom can I get from this book I just read, or this person I just had a random conversation with. Or how I'm feeling in my body today. So I started to collect those, and sometimes I slotted them in seasonally because I knew they might belong there, but others of them kind of floated, just kind of floated in the ether, waiting to find where they would fit together in the current that I was trying to create with the book. So it was like a puzzle where I had to, I was designing the pieces without knowing how they were going to fit together and what the picture was that I was going to build ultimately.
Wonderful. And thank you. Well, I was thinking that you described that there were some themes that seemed to go together. Can you talk a little bit about the types of themes that came up?
Sure. I mean, one of the themes is just the value of listening to our bodies and of using our bodies as a vehicle of understanding. We tend to think that that all of our understanding of things happens from the neck up.
Right.
It's like that's how we understand things, and we intellectualize everything. And in some cases, the smarter we are, the less connected we're going to be with our body, because we think that there's some kind of distinction between our body and our mind. And so one of the very strong themes in the book is this idea that the body-mind is one unified system that's operating together, and kind of trying to find different examples of that, and then also provide insights into ways that people might discover that for themselves. I mean, your description of going out and being in the middle of a run and realizing that you needed to forgive yourself is, to me, a fantastic example of that. It's like things flow through your body and they emerge while you're in movement. At the same time, stillness, meditation, the values of that are another kind of theme that, as a different way of listening to what's going on inside us, is another theme that I think emerges in the book. Our connection to other people, and the kind of strength of all of those invisible filaments to the past and the future and the present of people who've come through our lives. I think that's another season. That's another theme. I do think that even our kind of seasonal, the seasons of our emotions and our psychological state is another theme. Dailiness, you know, meeting ourselves where we are that day, what we do with that, and where we have the power to change that, and where we need to accept it, do both. All of those are themes. And also, I guess the fundamental, you know, baseline theme running through it, that our physical strength translates into strength in the world, but we need to access it in an intentional way. And that living from a place of intentionality is always going to be a stronger manifestation for us than just kind of reacting to everything that's coming along.
Yeah, thank you. And it's so powerful. You know, I speak on the show a bit about my own personal experience in living a very yang life. You know, it's all movement, power, authority, decision, sun, masculine oriented strength. And what that doesn't allow for is the balance that we need from the quiet, the silence, the moon, you know, the stillness practice. So it's interesting that you can, in some sense, even find the stillness while running, and which was really, really cool. For people who, you know, aren't athletes or don't consider themselves athletes, I think that can be a bit of a narrative that people might be afraid of, even starting some sort of activity, because we might have this internal dialogue going on within us that says, well, I'm not strong, I'm not flexible, I have this, that, the other pain going on in my body, I can't do that.
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
So the first thing I want to say on that is just that it was an argument with my publisher, that word athlete in the title. And I originally didn't want it at all, because I felt like, as you're saying, that it could be alienating, because people,
or somewhat elitist, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, even myself, like, you know, I feel like I have to call myself an athlete because that's what it says on the cover of my book, but
yeah, right here.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. But I came to peace with it because I started to think that athlete that is a word that encompasses when we are striving for personal excellence, when we are just trying to do something to our own highest level. And I want women to claim that term for themselves a lot more. And I feel like I encounter men who played basketball when they were in high school, and they don't do anything now, but they're like, I'm an athlete. It's been like 30 years since they were on the basketball. Right. They're an athlete.
Yeah.
And that's great.
Or guys that hike, but when was the last time they hiked? 4 years ago.
Right, exactly. Whereas a woman can have run a half marathon last weekend that she trained for 6 months, and she won't call herself an athlete. Oh, well, you know, I dabble. So I actually really want women
to really fascinating.
Claiming that for themselves a bit more. It's like, no, I deserve to call myself that. So I'm actually happy it's in the title, because then it allows me to campaign for that. But what we need to understand is that it's about, excellence is about us trying to do our best, whatever that looks like. That's all that matters. Whatever that looks like for you. It's like to not go through life half there, half trying, not putting yourself out there, not, we're so fearful. We're just so fearful all the time. I mean, I'm fearful all the time. Yeah. And the thing that we're most fearful about is not even failure, is the humiliation that someone saw that we failed. That seems to be
the projection of the self-judgment.
Right, exactly. And I want, you know, my profound hope with the book is to be kind of a companion with people, almost like a, you know, holding their hand to say, doesn't matter. You know, first of all, a lot fewer people are really looking and observing your failure because they're so obsessed about their own. And And secondly, it's not. Like, it's not, if you are trying your best, you can't be humiliated. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, because you know that, because you have that like inner strength that's nourishing you. I say that, you know, of course, I fear these things all the time myself, and they're, but that is also part of my, it's part of my work in the world, I think, is that I am willing to own my fear in front of other people and show them that as fearful as I am, I'm still standing. And I accept that as, you know, accept that as my work, which means I feel sometimes like I'm making a fool out of myself, but it was sort of the path that the vision quest set me on. And I have to say, actually, I just 2 weekends ago, 2 weekends ago, I went to this equine weekend where we were sort of communing with horses, not riding them, just having like a biofeedback communication with the horse,
sure.
Which was amazing, really amazing. But one of the things about it was that it confirmed for me that this path I've been on since my vision quest, of partly sort of modeling how we keep walking forward in the face of fear, is my path and is what I need to keep doing. So I hope that with my book, you know.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and thank you for that. It's sort of like, this is your running buddy.
Yes. Yes.
And I also, it was so great because when we talk about the things that hold people back from even starting in the first place, fear of failure, it's really about this idea that we have, some of us, in particular those of us who might consider ourselves more competitive or a competitive person, have this comparative analysis, and they say, well, I'm not her, so I'm not going to do it at all.
Yeah.
And this idea came to me as you were talking about that, which is this: it's not about being the best, but about being your best.
Yes.
Which is really a theme that I got from your book as well.
Yes.
Which I'm so glad to have. So even if folks who are watching or listening don't consider themselves an athlete, I absolutely think you should go get this book and get your running buddy or your activity buddy, and explore, because I think that's so much of what you are inspiring people to do. So that's wonderful.
And experiment with calling yourself an athlete.
Yeah.
Well,
it's like even yogis, you know, don't say, I'm not that athletic.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
like, really?
Yes.
You know, it's very fascinating.
It's interesting what you just said about, you know, the best versus one's own best, because I was lying awake a little bit last night having this exact conversation with myself, because I went to the National Theatre in the UK, films plays, and then you can watch them in movie theaters. It's called NT Live, National Theatre Live. So I went to film of Phoebe Waller-Bridge doing her solo show Fleabag, which super successful show is based on. And I think she's just ridiculously talented and kind of a category definer. And I was lying in bed and I was just thinking, oh, should I go on? I'm never going to be Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Like, she's just amazing. And then I thought, well, I'm not trying to do exactly the same thing as her. I'm trying to do something different. So I'm just going to take inspiration from how amazing she is. And it'll just make me try harder in my, you know, in my lane, what I'm doing in my lane. So I was having those conversations with myself.
Yeah, I think it's really a process, not an event. And, you know, stepping into our power requires moving through the fear. And people, I think, and we mentioned this maybe before, but that we can be so riddled with fear that we notice the fear and then we do nothing because we're afraid. Instead of saying something like, I'm afraid, maybe if we say something like, I'm noticing I'm having a fearful thought, and why is that? And then say, well, and I say this all the time, it's really the only way to get around fear is through it. And we don't get stronger in theory. We just don't. You can't manifest your way by sitting on your couch.
Right.
And failure is an excellent way to learn what is in our path for greatness.
Yes.
And you only do it experientially, because that's the earth realm. We're experiential learners. We learn by doing until we don't.
Yep.
So is there anything else as we come? We've got a few moments left. Anything else that you want to share with listeners? Both, one, how to get in touch with you, and also anything else that you'd like to share about your book.
So I'll answer the how to get in touch with me in 1 second. I just want to say, because I'm a word person, I guess.
Yeah.
I agreed with you when you said, we need to move through our fear. But then I rethought, because really what it is we're not moving through our fear. We're moving with it. It's going to stay with us. And it might get quieter and it might become more cooperative, but we're moving with it and we're accepting it into our lives. And we're saying, I see you there in all of your complexity, but we're going to keep moving in this direction. And I hear you, but this is what we're going to do together. And I've been doing, over the last maybe 4 or 5 months or so, part of my meditation practice is I will sit in meditation and just ask fear to tell me what it's thinking about. And it's surprising the range of things fear has to tell me that it's fearful about, if I just sit quietly and kind of let it speak in the first person. So they're there, but neutralize isn't even the right word. When we incorporate fear into our lives with some kindness and compassion, as opposed to just trying to lock it in the closet or punch it in the face or whatever, however it is you're thinking about, I'm getting through this, I'm going to be fearless, I'm like, it can kind of just be an engine for us and a motivator. So how to get in touch with me. Very easy through my website to find me, and also through Facebook. I'm on Facebook, and you can message me anytime. I love connecting with people. So
that's great. What is your website?
It is Mina Samuels, MINASAMUELS.com.
Wonderful. And you're on Instagram? Is that
I
also
am not on Instagram. I have to.
Well, it's good I asked.
No, it's good you asked. And I probably should be, but I'm just not as social media invested as the modern age.
Totally understand.
I'd like to be a little more unplugged, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyhow,
totally understand. Can folks email you? Do you have an email they can reach out?
Absolutely. They can email me at minasamuels@gmail.com. Very easy to get a hold of me. I am eminently available.
Awesome.
And I'm just going to put this out there just because because it's scary to say it. I'm in the midst of planning with a couple other fabulous women some weekend workshops that we're going to start offering that kind of pull together all of these sort of mindfulness and crafting our future ideas into some tools that people can use.
Beautiful. Well, I'm excited to hear more about that, and I hope you let me know so that I can share that with folks.
I will.
And it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show. Run like a girl 365 days a year. Go do it. Thank you so much. It's been a thrill.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.